Hey there, I'm your host, Jeremy Burke Miller, and today we're talking about the origins of Jetfire, one of the coolest Autobots in the Transformers universe. In his day, Jetfire was a true legend both on air and on the battlefield. Unfortunately, his time has passed. He's resting in places he can't even imagine. Jetfire is, in essence, ancient. Jetfire, an old Decepticon seeker, was present long even before the war started, and, unlike many others, saw his companions for what they truly were. This drove him to desert them and side with the Autobots, which was almost unheard of. As a result, Jetfire was never able to fully gain the trust of everyone else back in the day. He's still a valuable asset, capable of activating a space bridge and teleporting across vast distances. But this is somewhat tempered by the fact that he's so ancient. He's nearly coming apart after decades without a reliable source of energon. His processor kicked the bucket millennia ago. He has trouble remembering his own name these days, and he's fortunate if his teleportation takes him even to the correct planet. It makes him grumpy and gives him the nagging sensation that he's overlooked something vital. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
My name is Jetfire. Stop judging me.
Somebody shit the bed.
Jetfire in the Revenge of the Fallen movie. In the Revenge of the Fallen film, Jetfire is voiced by Mark Ryan in the original English version and Kenji Nomura in the Japanese version. Jetfire was one of the Fallen Seekers sent to find the Matrix of Leadership right after the Dynasty of Primes had hidden it on Earth. Unfortunately, he and the remaining Seekers were not able to discover the forged Tomb of the Primes. The only hint they could uncover was in the form of a puzzle. When dawn alights the dagger's tip, 3 knights will reveal the doorway. The Fallen eventually abandoned the Seekers, forcing them into a stasis lock due to a shortage of energon, until Leo Spitz, Michaela Baines, Sam Witwicky, Seymour Simmons, and Wheelie broke in with a little portion of the Allspark. A dormant Jetfire had remained in his alternative mode inside the Stephen F. Udvar Hazy Center at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. They only checked to see whose side Jetfire was on once the Allspark fragment hit him. The humans fled for the shelter when they saw the Decepticon emblem. But the wave of energon revived him. Jetfire decided to leave the horrible mausoleum where he was being imprisoned to get a better sense of where he was. After failing to override and shoot the doors, Jetfire blasted them aside and meandered around the plains outside, destroying a couple when the humans approached him. He initially stated that he couldn't talk to them since he was on a mission, but he did inquire about what world he was on. He disliked the word Earth, believing it should have been dirt. Jetfire inquired about the Civil War and explained that he had switched over to the side of the Autobots, as a very personal decision. As a result, the smaller Wheelie defected to a human woman he called the Warrior Goddess. Jetfire, still puzzled, punched the ground and yelled that he's had a number of issues with his mother, and also that his dad had been the first wheel. He could not morph, but performed his tasks with respect and dignity. At that instant, a parachute stowed within him sprang open, dragging him down. Sam then attempted to explain to the rickety Transformer about what was taking place. Sam discussed Megatron as well as the Fallen, as he completed etching Cybertronian signs on the Earth. Jetfire raged that the Fallen had been the first Decepticon, and had abandoned him to rust on the Earth. The symbols were part of Jetfire's purpose, and they awakened his memory bank sufficiently to convince him to create a space bridge, sending the entire crew to Egypt, even Bumblebee, both the twins, and Wheelie. Jetfire thanked them for allowing him to stay on the planet and informed them about the Dynasty of Primes, the Fallen, Cybertron's initial interaction with Earth, and the Star Harvester, which could obliterate a sun and transform it into energon, as well as the Matrix of Leadership, which was buried on Earth. He explained that only Primes would be able to vanquish the Fallen, and he thought there were none remaining. Sam informed him of Optimus Prime's whereabouts, which piqued the ancient Seeker's attention, but he was saddened to learn of Prime's death. Sam then pondered whether the Matrix could bring Optimus back to life. Jetfire stated that it actually wasn't the intended usage of the Matrix, but that the energy therein was beyond any other known. Jetfire could only do so much for the party, and after explaining the puzzle, he pushed them to rush out and discover the Tomb of the Primes. Jetfire appeared during the cinematic fight around the Great Pyramid of Giza, which held the Star Harvester, and tried to stick the touchdown, which did not proceed as intended. He instantly resolved to demonstrate how they delivered misery in his day, slicing Mixmaster from across his chest and decapitating the Constructicon with his axe. An unexpected strike from Scorponok gravely injured him, and the injury proved deadly despite him crushing the Decepticon's skull. Luckily, Jetfire was rewarded with one more marvel when Sam Witwicky utilized the Matrix to restore Optimus Prime. Jetfire was ecstatic, unable to believe he was witnessing a live Prime. Sadly, the Fallen stepped in and attacked, causing Optimus to be injured and snatching the Matrix, which they placed in the Harvester. As he lay there breathing his final breaths, Jetfire, who thought he'd never done anything worthwhile in his life, presented his components to Optimus Prime, stating they would give him energy like none he'd ever experienced. Jetfire cut off his spark and then died, telling Optimus to fulfill his destiny. Jetfire's death was not in vain. Ratchet immediately ordered Jolt to commence a thorough transfer of the rocket engines and weaponry systems onto Optimus. Using Jetfire's massive armaments and engines, Optimus blasted through a telekinetically created rubble wall all around the pyramid. He demolished the Star Harvester to prevent it from being unleashed on the sun. Prime then confronted the Fallen, as well as Megatron, sending Megatron soaring through some ruins with his afterburners. During the struggle, the Fallen detached the left thruster and used it to hit Prime in his face. However, Optimus eventually won and cut off the Fallen's spark source, destroying the deceitful Prime. Following the battle, Optimus immediately removed Jetfire's components. Exploring his comic origins. According to the IDW comics, the Allspark Cube spawned a race of strong, trans-dimensional entities as the original occupants of Cybertron in the ancient past. The cube bestowed these aliens with incredible abilities while also terraforming their globe, but it was not infinite and progressively diminished. Despite their extraordinary capacity to travel across dimensions, the early entities discovered that the Allspark's vitality could be renewed by collecting the energies of stars. However, they were still unable to identify new stars to meet their objectives. The cube arrived to the rescue once more, producing a race of laborers with the capacity to shift their shapes. Jetfire was one of the earliest of these new creatures, a seeker who had the power to fly beyond space in pursuit of new suns. And when he found it, he would guide the others and his lords back there so that an extractor could be built to sap the power of the stars, refilling the Allspark. Jetfire worked directly for a Prime who would eventually become the Fallen, harvesting numerous stars for him while believing he was assisting the dynasty of Primes in its entirety, rather than the Fallen's schemes in particular. The Fallen gradually revealed to Jetfire, his most devoted and capable seeker, that the dynasty no longer represented Cybertron's best interests. Jetfire had unknowingly sacrificed an inhabited star system as a result of the Fallen's deception, and he was dumbstruck when he was given this information. Despite his reservations, Jetfire continued to cooperate with the Fallen. His master and a tiny army of Constructicon robots had formed the Decepticons, a new covert group with the goal of someday overthrowing the dynasty. When primitive life appeared, Jetfire pursued them to a wasteland on a little blue planet to create another star harvester. Soon after, the dynasty arrived to put a stop to the Fallen's treachery. Jetfire discovered too late that he belonged to the bad side. The Fallen transported Jetfire and his fellow underlings into orbit, leaving the Primes to battle each other alone. Jetfire confronted the Constructicons as they plunged planetward, finally winning, but at a cost. He fell from orbit and remained inactive for several thousand years. Jetfire began exploring the Earth after waking up, choosing different alternative forms to remain concealed. In 1998, he camouflaged as a section of the USS Maine. Jetfire felt energy identical to the Fallen's and broke free from the wooden structure that constituted the remainder of his alternative mode, unwittingly leading the crew aboard to believe they had really been attacked, resulting in the Spanish-American War. Instead of following the transmission to the Arctic, he discovered a near-comatose robot carrying the Decepticon insignia. When the Seeker realized he wasn't the Fallen, but rather somebody named Megatron, Jetfire had never heard of, he hit him and turned to go back. Jetfire noticed he had spectators at this point, a gathering of humans that had been examining Megatron, and had responded to Jetfire's appearance by firing at him. Jetfire quickly grabbed the Decepticon and threw him to his doom. At the same time, the other people used explosives to shatter the glacial ice and send Jetfire tumbling into the icy depths. Jetfire discovered an underground tunnel network in the depths of the ocean and sought refuge there. The Seeker started his search after detecting a familiar source of energy somewhere across the Earth, but he was running out of energy, and it ended up taking him 15 years of wandering about below before he could follow the signals to their source. Along the trip, he saw bizarre, monstrous creatures that lived in the caverns, and he slaughtered anybody who attempted to challenge him. Finally, Addled and lethargic from the lack of power, he discovered the origin of the signal in 1913, the Allspark, all on its own, which was being mined by the same people he had encountered in the Arctic. Jetfire went for the cube to defend himself against another attack, unwittingly unleashing a burst of energon from it, which brought numerous surrounding devices to life and overwhelmed his systems. Jetfire quickly transported through a space bridge to unknown locations to exhaust the surplus energy. Jetfire reappeared in 1944 in the shape of something like a Lockheed P-38 Lightning, after being seized by Nazi scientists and confined in a cryo chamber at Castle Neuschwanstein during World War II. The Nazis investigated his mind and body, reverse engineering tank mecha from his components, and stealing a blueprint of the tunnel system from his memories. When Sector 7, the state agency formed from the initial group of people Jetfire had battled in the Arctic, found out about new Nazi tech, they developed a force headed by William Simmons to locate and destroy Jetfire. Simmons was the team's sole survivor, and he made it to Castle Neuschwanstein prior to being attacked by the Nazis' greatest invention, the Panzergegenten, which he attempted to destroy with a big bag of explosives. Instead, the bombs impacted Jetfire's chamber, releasing the Seeker, and he proceeded to halt the Panzergegenten by pulling out its human components. Jetfire demanded to know how humanity can do such heinous things to their own species. And Simmons replied that it wasn't his fault, that he'd assumed his explosion would have destroyed them all, causing Jetfire to question why he treasured his life so very little. Simmons answered that he treasured his life, but his freedom more, which made Jetfire pause and reminded him of why he turned on the Fallen eons earlier. He secretly demolished the fortress and everyone within it, then carried Simmons to an Allied station before disappearing again. He saw oneness in Simmons, and humanity, that he hadn't experienced before. Jetfire's encounter with Simmons had a profound effect on him, and he presumably followed the guy and his organization for the next 5 years in the guise of a Lockheed U-2 espionage plane. He was present in 1954 when vandalism at Sector 7's Arctic outpost trapped Simmons and a small crew with a rapidly melting Megatron. When Walter Simmons ordered liquid nitrogen explosives to be thrown on the compound, Jetfire swooped in to save the younger Simmons' wife, Anne, as well as Philip Nolan from the chilling blast. When Jetfire told Walter that he couldn't rescue William, Walter couldn't help but wonder why he saved them at all. Jetfire stated that William's actions had compelled him to atone for his previous misdeeds, and before going, Jetfire assured Walter that he was no more the creature Walter had encountered in those caverns half a century earlier, and Walter didn't have to be assured either. Jetfire chose to switch to the Autobots over the following few years, trying to put his Decepticon past behind him. Jetfire used the transportation form of the Lockheed A-12 operated by Sector 7 member Heath Donovan by 1964. He remained in vehicle form as he transported Bumblebee and program operatives David Reeve and Diana Lux to a castle used as a hidden base by current Decepticons. Lux had a sensation that the aircraft was alive en route, but brushed it off as a fantasy, much to Jetfire's relief. Jetfire was walking in the desert in the later part of the 20th century when an SR-71 Blackbird slammed into him and detonated. He took on its form amidst the mayhem. Jetfire, according to the Titan magazines, harkens to an era when warriors lived by a rule of honor. He was dispatched to Earth on the instructions of the Fallen, believing he was acting in Cybertron's best interests. He was surprised to discover the Fallen was a wicked bastard. Jetfire retreated into hiding after he witnessed the Fallen jail the other Primes. In 1998, he made the best of the SR-71's retirement to become a permanent resident at the National Air and Space Museum. He eventually became dissatisfied with the Decepticons and changed sides. It is unclear when. In the Unite for the Universe manga, Prime used the components in battle with a troop of Decepticons at the Hida Mountain. He then used these to travel to Greece, where the Autobots had located Starscream's headquarters. On the road of destruction, Prime had Project Unite discontinued after foiling Starscream's efforts to utilize it for himself. According to Ultra Magnus, the bot who would turn into Jetfire, as well as his brother, who would turn into Jetstorm, were twins separated from the same protoform in the Transformers animated comic. As mediocre energon refiners, they were performing the painfully slow shift. However, they were often disputing and arguing at work until one day, an argument broke out due to which an accident happened, culminating in a massive explosion that knocked them both offline. The elite guard, searching for throwaway bots to transform into the first ever flying Autobots, grabbed their dead shells and altered them for flying alternative modes, while also utilizing Starscream's programming to enable them to fly with them. Despite fears of generating psychotic killers, The only adverse effects appeared to be that they grew even more cocky and wilder than before. After a decacycle of coding and construction, the brothers visited Ultra Magnus. The very first action they took part in was criticizing one another in their new looks, which resulted in another fight right there. Sentinel Prime as well as Jazz both raised reservations about their appropriateness as elite guard candidates, and were tasked with providing them with specific elite guard training. Sentinel was the first to train them, and after noticing that their alternative modes were identical, he named them Jetfire and Jetstorm. When he instructed them both to transform and roll out, both brothers replied that they couldn't, since they were jets and didn't have wheels. Sentinel then took them to transform and fly out. They quickly obliged and took off, immediately launching into yet another fight over their new flying abilities. Unfortunately, sentry towers detected them as Decepticons because they were in the air, but all of this served to prove that the defensive guns needed a significant update. After working with Sentinel Prime, the twins moved on to Circuitsu with Jazz. They quickly discovered that they couldn't comprehend a thing he said. He promptly knocked them down after he told them to demonstrate to him their moves. However, when they unexpectedly began working together, they effectively and quickly took him down. The twins became haughty as they effortlessly defeated every battle sim the Elite Guard had. As a result, Perceptor decided to develop a new simulation that included Decepticons. Another battle simulation involving Starscream himself was created by employing more of Starscream's programming. While they started off nicely, things quickly deteriorated when a prototype of Starscream was actually presented. Simulated Starscream began beating the living crap out of them, taunting and injuring them with true Starscream sadism and malice. Once the Elite Guard attempted to shut things down, they discovered that it was impossible. Jetfire, enraged at the replica Starscream because of what he did to his brother, began setting them both alight with his newly acquired flamethrowers. But he couldn't really cope with the new abilities. It started manifesting itself in his physical body as well, threatening to engulf the entire infrastructure in flames. As Jetstorm began to feel better, he noticed his brother struggling to maintain control. Desperate to protect his twin from the new ability, he discovered abilities of his own. Wind and ice turbines, powerful enough to extinguish Jetfire's flames, while also cooling down his body. The Sim Starscream reappeared, ready to attack, even as the twins praised and applauded each other. But then the brothers learned their true strength. They could merge into Safeguard, a singular, more robust form, and defeat Starscream with a more controlled discharge of their combined energies. When they were split again in jet mode by Sim Starscream, they combined to form a more gigantic, more powerful jet that nearly defeated Sim Starscream. When they were ultimately removed from the simulation, they were informed that they had completed their training and become Elite Guard junior officers. Their very first task was to chase Waspinator down with Sentinel and Jazz in the hopes of locating Decepticon commanders. Jetfire would also appear in Devil's Due Publishing's third G.I. Joe and Transformers crossover. He was present at the Capital City Goodwill festivities with other Autobots, dueling Reflector, but was called off by Optimus Prime. Later, he was shown as a member of the joint Autobot and G.I. Joe army tasked with rescuing Optimus Prime. Optimus Prime has returned to Earth, leading Rodimus, Mirage, Jetfire, Grimlock, Cliffjumper, and Bumblebee in the fun publication's Classic Verse Tales. In the narrative Crossing Over, Jetfire was one of Optimus Prime's Autobot warriors that responded to Megatron's sighting and arrived precisely on time to safeguard the dimensional crossing Autobot Skyfall from Megatron. Sunstreaker, Optimus Prime, Jetfire, and Ironhide protected a city at Fight's End. In the Marvel Comics, Jetfire was created on Earth by Shockwave to be one of his new Decepticon soldiers, given life by the creation matrix energies tapped into from the prisoner Autobot commander, Optimus Prime. Prime, however, transmitted the matrix into the consciousness of the Autobots' human comrade, Buster Witwicky, before Shockwave could do so. Shockwave programmed Jetfire's dead shell to retrieve Buster, but Buster used the matrix to disintegrate Jetfire before Shockwave could complete his mission. Buster then rebuilt Jetfire and utilized him to save Optimus Prime, who instilled real life into Jetfire. Immediately following this, Jetfire took part in the Dinobot hunt, helping to hunt down the rogue Dinobots that were running wild throughout America in the UK's Transformers comic book, which interspersed its very own original content between reproductions of the US Marvel title. Jetfire was not respected by Ironhide, since he still bore the Decepticon emblem that Shockwave had branded on him until he rescued him from the crazed Slag, confirming his Autobot devotion. Following that, in the US title, he completed the Rite of Autobrand, He then was finally branded with the Autobot emblem. Jetfire also served as the Autobots' interim commander against Galvatron throughout the Target 2006 plot, and was apparently well liked by the Autobots, as he was among the few voices to be heard when a successor Autobot commander had to be elected. Jetfire was subsequently among some of the Transformers who sought to protect New York City from the extremely powerful Starscream, but he was disabled along with the rest of the team. Unlike the majority of Starscream's casualties, there were no signs that he had been resurrected by the energy of the Nucleon.
The body's too slow! You must be fast, like fire!
His presence in the animated series. In the Transformers animated cartoon, Jetfire is voiced by Tom Kenny in the English version and Kappe Yamaguchi in the Japanese. Jetfire with his twin Jetstorm arrived on Earth alongside Sentinel and Jazz and swiftly discovered the traitor they sought. They had no idea that they'd actually found someone else who had been masquerading as Wasp. Jetfire was ready to fire at the small bot, but his back was fired at by another unidentified bot. Jetstorm hurried back to his injured twin, instructing him to tag team after his brother's wind mistakenly dragged Wasp away. This would ultimately not happen, as another mystery bot slammed Jetstorm in his back. The two adopted an aggressive strategy. Understanding that this was a new threat, Jetfire evaded Ratchet's magnetic attacks and raced up a wall, informing Ratchet that he was just too slow for him before defeating him with a jump as well as some fire. The two speedy and acrobatic twins resolved to double up and then merge into Safeguard after some more sprinting up and leaping on walls. After easily defeating Ratchet, they faced a strength test against the somewhat tinier Optimus till their mentors arrived and explained what was happening. Sentinel directed the twins to track out the runaway they had blown up, and the Autobots soared away. Jetfire unleashed a volley of flames on the three Autobots on the ground, enraged by the discovery that the two other Autobots were liars as well. Jetfire tried to burn Bulkhead after his twin had captured Wasp, but was halted when Prowl leaped on top of him. While attempting to assault Prowl, Bulkhead threw Jetfire flying through the air to where his twin and the runaway were. After hearing Bulkhead's bizarre argument for why Wasp was apparently Bumblebee, they decided to try to find out who was who by pitting Wasp opposite Bumblebee in a digital game match. Both twins showed their joy at discovering the notion of a computer game. However, they were still unable to play the winner as they had anticipated. Back on the flagship, when the Decepticons take over, Swindle captures the twins in a bubble. Eventually, the twins were tasked with catching Ratchet as well as Captain Fanzone. They were told to activate Fortress Maximus before witnessing Ratchet and Captain Fanzone rob the Magnus Hammer.
No orders from you. I am an Autobot now.
In the Transformers Generation 1 animated series, Jetfire was known as Skyfire, and in Italy he was called Aquila Eagle. Skyfire was a researcher and explorer who worked with Starscream on Cybertron prior to the battle between the Autobots and the Decepticons. They examined an undiscovered planet, actually a primordial Earth, but found no evidence of intelligent life. Skyfire wanted to investigate the globe further, and when they got close enough, a powerful polar storm whisked him up and trapped him underneath the Arctic ice. Starscream looked for his companion, but couldn't find him, so he departed to Cybertron alone. Several million years afterward, around 1984, the Decepticons uncovered and revived the frozen Skyfire while extracting heat energy out from the Earth's core. Skyfire rejoined the Decepticons after reuniting with an old buddy, Starscream. Once the Autobots appeared, Skyfire faced them in battle before rescuing Sparkplug with Spike Witwicky from an ice floe. Unknowingly, he sent the pair to Megatron, with the belief that he, along with the other Decepticons, cherished human life. But when Megatron imprisoned them, Skyfire began to doubt his leadership. When Starscream commanded him to eliminate the kidnapped Autobot search team, he objected, and Starscream unleashed his weaponry on him, severely injuring him. Ratchet repaired him, and he joined the Autobots, engaging with a duel with Starscream that ended when he martyred himself to halt the core drain, drowning himself in frost once more. Skyfire was found a short time later by Wheeljack, as well as Sideswipe, and promptly joined an attack against the Decepticons near Peru, where the evil robots were yet again trying to utilize the Earth's core energies for their own purposes. Thundercracker almost let Skyfire demolish the villain's new weaponry, but was wounded by Starscream and rebuilt with difficulty by Spike. Skyfire would end up making semi-regular cameos in the near future, assisting the Autobots in evacuating their base because the volcano it was rooted in erupted. Skyfire would reappear in a few more episodes before disappearing from the series due to legal challenges. He is highly cocky in Transformers Armada. When Optimus Prime sent a small army to Earth to examine the Minicon signal emerging from the planet, Jetfire was left in command on Cybertron. but subsequently went to assist his commander on Earth. Jetfire arrived shortly after Decepticon strategist Thirst, scanning a spacecraft from Earth upon arrival to a planet, and appeared on the scene in the midst of a conflict, utterly throwing off Thrust's planned strategy and enabling the Autobots to emerge victorious. When Thrust planned the next Decepticon raid on the Autobots, Optimus Prime and Jetfire once again threw a monkey wrench into his plans by revealing their ability to combine, once again thwarting the villain's efforts. Though Optimus Prime called it Jet Convoy the very first time they merged, he refers to them as Jet Optimus later in the series. Jetfire's extraordinary spaceflight talents make him an invaluable aid to the Autobot troops, helping them to rescue a Minicon off Mars. He travels there alongside Starscream, who had recently joined the Autobots. Jetfire is disappointed that the traitorous Decepticon will keep him company, but he has little choice when Starscream just flies off first and dumps him behind. So, Jetfire's only option is to unwillingly accompany the brainless robot. On the route to Mars, though, he loses track of Starscream and must rely on the Air Defense Minicon unit to locate him. He offers Starscream to join him in his search for the Minicon, but the latter declines. Jetfire then captures and cuffs Starscream for disobeying orders. Megatron with Tidal Wave assaults them as Jetfire tows his captive back to Earth. Despite their conflict, Jetfire and Starscream demonstrate their ability to work together. So they are successful in repelling the attackers and rescuing the Minicon. It is worth noting that after Starscream declines his assistance despite being severely injured, Jetfire says that he is obstinate as usual. Presumably, he had already gotten to know Starscream's personality well enough. When Optimus Prime is killed by the Hydra Cannon, a Decepticon superweapon, Jetfire stands aside to let Hotshot take charge, keeping a secondary position even after Prime is revived by the might of the Minicons. Jetfire later appears during the Unicron battles, in which the planet-eating gigantic robot Unicron strikes Cybertron and delivers the Autobots' human friends, Rad, Carlos, and Alexis to Earth just after the battle. In Transformers Energon, over the next decade, Jetfire was upgraded into a new body form and acquired the Spark of Combining from Primus, enabling him to merge with other Autobots, most notably the novice trooper Ironhide, whom he had to carefully teach and lead through the combination procedure. Despite his exterior modifications, Jetfire's mentality and viewpoint remained intact, always prepared with a clever quip to keep things lighthearted even in the midst of a fierce fight. He is once again the Autobots' second-in-command. When Megatron assumed charge of the restored Unicron, Primus used his abilities to permanently supercharge several of the Autobots, including Jetfire, and recolored their armor. Unicron's body was destroyed in the ensuing conflict, but his spark survived and controlled Megatron, who expanded to monstrous proportions. To face the colossal enemy, Jetfire and the Autobots used the Spark of Combination to the fullest, changing their forms into pure energy and fusing with Optimus Prime, growing him to comparable dimensions and letting him confront Galvatron directly. Ironically, Galvatron was eventually the agent of Unicron's destruction when he threw himself into an Energon star constructed by Primus in an attempt to prevent Unicron from permanently taking over his body. Jetfire, known as Dreadrock in Japan and introduced as a different character therein, remains the Autobots' second-in-command in Transformers Cybertron. Jetfire was involved in various fights on Earth, Cybertron, and Giant Planet. To recover from the pressures of the last battle against Unicron, he took a vacation to the planet Nebulos, where he unwittingly picked up the native accent, sounding rather like an Australian. His rest was cut short when Primus's Energon sun broke in on itself, generating a massive black hole that endangered Cybertron's safety. Having returned to the planet, Jetfire assisted the Autobots in evacuating before returning to Earth, where he advised the Autobots to reconsider using earthly vehicle alternative modes to disguise themselves from the humans, adopting a brand new cargo plane alternative mode for himself. He went on the feud with Decepticon Thundercracker about who was the better flyer. Jetfire was a braggart. After the risk of the black hole was eliminated, he was chosen as commander of Cybertron in the absence of Optimus Prime. What makes Jetfire so special? Jetfire can use space bridges to teleport. He expressly mentioned a space bridge before hurling himself and the remainder of the heroes halfway across the planet to Egypt. He appears to utilize his talent as a type of flying by teleporting across distances. He is also skilled at combat and can fight with an axe, a heavy laser machine gun, a charged shell cannon, and missiles. Because of his Air Guardian duties, he was the only Transformer among the Autobots who could actually fly. He was also in the unique position of knowing how Starscream's aerial combat methods worked. Jetfire was also considerably smarter, more skilled, and faster than the average Autobot. In some instances, he even surpassed Optimus Prime in these abilities. Jetfire's powers and abilities vary in all different story arcs that he was a part of.
The doorway! Go now! Go! That was my mission! It's yours!
Jetfire had a scientific mind. Not only was his intellect devoted to scientific endeavors, but his anatomy was a reflection of the technologies he so thoroughly studied. Every component of his frame was cutting edge and up to date. Because he had been a Decepticon long before, he lacked the faith of his colleagues. Because Jetfire was empathetic, several Autobots worried that he might be soft on their adversaries, or worse, turn on them once he realized his cold calculations swung the other way. Jetfire would regard their illogical misunderstandings as repugnant. To him, science was, after all, the quest for truth, and truth, he claimed, went hand in hand with liberty. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks, everyone.